camcorder going. But yeah, Doug used to make the year in review videos that the UAC makes, which is pretty cool. And then Sherpa Cinemas took over. You know, he couldn't compete with the big folks out there. But we're bringing him out of retirement tonight to talk about avalanche accidents and like human interactions in the Ogden Mountains for a century plus. So he said it's part one. He has part two for you next year. But yeah, give a round of applause, Doug Wewer.
Thanks, Corey. Can you hear me all right? Good? All right. So, yeah, so he said, I've been at Snow Basin, did some work for the Utah Avalanche Center. I'm also on search and rescue, which is going to be relevant later. I'm also an engineer for the Forest Service, and lately I've been focusing on snowflake photography as well. Why are local avalanches important? It's probably the #1 hazard that many of us in this room are going to face in the mountains each winter. I love that we have such a diverse community here, and hopefully we can all learn something tonight. This is a selected group of events, so it's by no means a complete history. There's a bunch of decades even missing, but this is some of the things that I've found. I love snow. Oh, one more thing, and media is often wrong. You guys have all been on enough search and rescues and other things. So, so take these stories with a grain of salt. I actually pulled a couple stories out because they were actually not in the Ogden Mountains, and my wife picked them out last night. She said, "This is Idaho." So, anyhow, so I love snow, love avalanches, and I've learned that I've loved history. When I worked at the Appalachian Mountain Club in New Hampshire, I worked at Tuckerman's Ravine. At the base of that, I was a caretaker there, and a caretaker Tux, but I was a night watchman first. And at night, when I was done with all my duties, I just had to be there at the front desk. And so I would go over to the library that they had and bring books over and movies, watch some movies of the 10th Mountain Division, and really learned a lot about the history there. And I was impressed with how much they had. Moving here to Utah in 2000, I was kind of surprised that there wasn't a good collection of history. So I kind of went digging. One of my first jobs here, kind of a separate thing, was working for the Utah Avalanche Center, entering all their avalanche records from like, I think 70s and 80s and 90s into their database prior to the Olympics. I also did that with Snow Basin, and then with GR and some others, we dug through some old Snow Basin records to find weather history, including broken windows in an old Forest Service cabin. We found some papers on the floor right before it got demolished that were what I think from the 60s GR, weren't they? Some other records. So 60s, yeah. So some old stuff. It's taken some work, but we found a lot of the history. And then I actually used to read, I started searching newspaper articles online at lunch, just searching Ogden, Avalanche, Slide, different things, and found some cool things from the 1800s. That's what I'm going to show you to start with that tonight. And I also ended up at the Weber State Special Collection. A guy named Ralph Johnston did a history collection for the Snow Basin Ski Patrol. It's I actually photographed it all. And the Snow Basin patrollers, you have access to it at the mountain digitally, and some of that's in here as well. Turns out history runs in the family. My grandfather was the executive director of the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission, and he was in charge of a lot of the historical properties in Pennsylvania. So I've been attracted to the stories. It must be in my blood a little bit. So my goal tonight is, we kind of have a changing of the guard here, in the Ogden area. If you guys notice that the crowds, we're getting more and more people here that are spending time in the mountains. The patrollers are hiring a lot more folks. A lot of new folks are moving here from out of town. So I want to, hopefully tonight, we're going to talk about some things on the screen, but I hope there's some interaction afterwards with folks in the crowd. I've invited some folks that were here involved with some of the incidents in the 80s and 90s. And look around and find someone that's maybe got some silver hair and ask them some questions if you're new here. So, and it's going to be informed. If you have questions, open it up. I do want to hear at the end, I want to hear if anyone else has some things to share as well. So we're not going to cover ski patrol and avalanche worker stuff inbounds, but a lot happens there. So we're going to kind of do out of bounds, at least when the ski area is back then, it was out of bounds. So, all right, let's get going here. So we're going to start in 1880. Oh, first, this is the Ralph Johnston collection. Just an example from the book. And this is another one of the historical avalanche books that I read in Colorado that kind of inspired me to do a little more research. All right, so here we go. February 1880, snowslide in Ogden Canyon. Yesterday afternoon, a snowslide came tearing down the south side of Ogden Canyon, about 1 mile above South Wheeler's Mill. I think that's pretty close to the dam, current day dam, or 80 rods above Goodale's Canyon. The rebellious snowmass hurled itself down into the river, choking it all up, and then forced its irresistible way up the opposite incline, rushing across the bottom and blocking 100 feet of road to a height of 20 feet. The river was almost dry down at Johnson's. As far as known, no accident is to be deplored. A caution may well be placed here that it's highly dangerous at this time of year to travel in the canyons whenever there is a south wind blowing. So even back then, they knew a little bit about weather affecting avalanches, right? As the lower strata of snow are liable to give way under the rapid breath of the south wind and set themselves into motion. Once in progress, the sliding mass will propel itself, this gigantic bulk carrying with it destruction and devastation from which there is no escape or human agency. So this is February of 1884. Yesterday, a grand snowslide came into Ogden Canyon about 2 miles east of the electric light works. It was of such magnitude that for 1 hour and a half, the river was stopped on its onward course. Again, another river stoppage. We were informed that towards evening, there was only a very small amount of water in the river, even as far down as the electric light works. During the night, however, the water worked through the canyon and came rushing down the canyon with terrific force. The slide covered the width of the canyon and is very deep. As far as we were able to learn, nobody was injured. Okay, this next one is, I think, probably my favorite one. It's kind of a Lassie story. So Magpie Campground over here is on the way up to Causey. So we got Huntsville going up here. And apparently there was a lumber mill back there. I think that was what Magpie is named after, the family there. And this is probably in 1880s, this era, I think would be like the horse team that was hauling the lumber. So think of that in your head. Okay, buried in a snowslide, rescued after 2 hours of close confinement. On Wednesday afternoon, a snowslide occurred in the Magpie Canyon, 2 miles from the mouth of South Fork in Ogden Valley, which came very near proving fatal to one man. Eli Tracy was coming down the canyon with a load of lumber when he saw the avalanche coming down upon him, but being unable to get away, he was caught by the huge mass of snow and hurled to the ground. The snow bearing team, wagon, and driver 7 feet deep. 2 horses were killed outright, one of them having a stake driven through it. Tracy was not killed, but certainly in a most helpless condition. His dog, a most faithful animal, was the means of saving his life. Upon coming down the canyon, Tracy passed several teams going up. The dog, which escaped the slide, ran back to these teams and, making some extraordinary demonstrations, returned. No notice was taken of the animal until it came back the second and then the third time, displaying much excitement. Thinking that something was wrong, the men returned and soon learned the meaning of the animal's behavior. Some were dispatched to the head of the canyon for shovels, while others remained and, hastily making some wooden spades, began digging away. Striking the end of the load, they calculated Tracy's place on the wagon when caught by the slide, and after digging down 7 feet, uncovered his face. He was then black in the face from the close confinement and the bruises he had received. By this time, the shovels had arrived, and he was soon taken out of the grave, alive but unconscious, and in a very precarious condition. He had been buried for 2 hours and a quarter and owed his life to the intelligence of his dog. The animal waited on the slide until it saw the face of its master uncovered, and then struck out for home. Going some distance, it met a sleigh occupied by Mrs. Tracy, who had heard of her husband's accident, and was hurrying to the scene of the troubles. The animal, as if it had gone expressly to impart the information to her, jumped onto the sleigh, rode back for some distance until it rested, when it jumped out and ran cheerfully along to the spot where the master was being cared for. The loss of the team, though no comparison to the loss had he been killed, places the family in rather destitute circumstances. But friends are ready to help. $20 or more were raised right at the slide, and there is little doubt that greater help will yet to be offered. It was a narrow escape and one that will not soon be forgotten. So I think that's my favorite story of all of these. Pretty cool. So first avalanche dog in Utah, maybe? I don't know. So, okay, so this is over in Weber Canyon, so by Mountain Green. Okay, massive snow, rock, and debris cover railroad 8 feet deep. This is up by Devil's Slide. So About midnight last night, there was a heavy snowslide at the Devil's Slide. Oh, this is 1904, January 1904. Heavy snowslide at the Devil's Slide. You guys know where that is? The big rock slide? Yeah, there's a little pull off. I always want to go sledding down the middle of that in the winter. Did you ski it? Nice. Sweet. All right. Let's do a talk on that next time. Okay. And so 28 miles east of Ogden, at that point, a heavy mass of snow, rocks, and other debris came down on the track and blockaded it 8 feet deep for a distance of 100 feet. Traffic was delayed for 2 hours. And back then, the train was a big deal, right? So that was the main transportation to the west. Okay, so this is 1907. This is a snowslide and a man, horse and a man in Ogden Canyon, H.C. Farrell. A mountain of snow 3 feet in depth slid into the canyon at noon at a point called Windy Turn, west of the old sawmill. H.C. Farrell and a cutter was caught fairly by the nose of the slide and carried into the river. He escaped serious injury, but his horse has not yet been rescued. It is thought to be in the river under the snow. This is the first slide of any consequence in the canyon this winter. The snow is reported on the mountainsides to be from 3 to 4 feet in depth, loose and ready without a moment's warning. To come down to the river into the road below. Travel in the canyon is attended by an element of danger, which increases as the snow continues to fall. So Ogden Canyon was the only route in and out of Ogden Valley at that time, I believe. That may be slightly off a little bit with the North Ogden Divide getting built, but that was a heavy use travel. So when they had slides in here and it was dangerous, it really impacted travel. So traffic is temporarily blocked by the slide, which spreads across the road. And I'm just going to skip down. So Mr. Farrell's escape was remarkable. He had heard the roar of the slide. He whipped his horse forward, was unable to escape the avalanche. Powerless to aid himself, he was swept into the river, from whence he escaped without great injury. In the fall, he was separated from his outfit, which, Rosie, is that your gear for your horse? The outfit? Okay. All right. And fortunately was saved from burial in the snowslide. All right. Okay, so this next story is about a group of boys going up to hike Mount Ogden. And so has anyone heard of the Malin's Resort up there? It's built I'm not sure when it was built, but it was closed in 1904, up here, burned down in 1910. So this was after the fact. This is 1924. And this photo here is courtesy of Holly Ahern on the Snow Basin Patrol. So snowslide covers path to Mount Ogden on Saturday, May 12th, 1924, 6 o'clock in the morning. So these guys are pretty, so we've got Thomas Jensen, 6 boys, Joe, George, Harold, Albert, Vernon, and Fred. Listen to where they left. They left from 26th Street and Grant Avenue to make a hike to Mount Ogden. Now, I don't know, has anybody here that hardcore? Okay. The hikers arrived at Malin's Height 1 hour and 30 minutes after leaving the city. 10 minutes later, they were in the Grove, and there was, they had the wagon trail up there then. So 10 minutes later, they were in the Grove where they ate, played quite a few games, capture the flag being the principal game. Leaving the Grove at 11 o'clock, 11:45, they once more plunged into the vigorous hike remaining before them. So that's kind of cool. They went on a hike and stopped, played some games, and then continued on. So just what we do, right? About 3 blocks above Malin's Grove. Now I had to look at this because I was like, 3 blocks, is that down in the city? And they were still down below. I think that's just how they talked about the distance, because Malin's Heights, they were already there, which is up on the mountain. So I think that they were hiking up into this zone right here. And they were astounded to find that the regular path to Mount Ogden was completely buried in a large snowslide, ranging between 50 and 100 feet in depth, they reported. I'm sure those boys had no exaggeration either. So, okay, the snowslide had entirely demolished part of the surrounding hills and had uprooted hundreds of trees. The snow, starting about 3 blocks above Malin's Grove, filled the path to Mount Ogden within 3/4 of a mile to the peak. That's pretty long ways. After a hard climb, the hikers finally reached Mount Ogden, making the hike less the time spent in the Grove playing in 4 hours and 20 minutes. So not bad from downtown Ogden. The hike to Mount Ogden was the second for Fred Flinders and Harold Jones, and the first time for the remaining group. After the hilarious and long hike, the boys arrived in the city at 5 o'clock, tired, happy, and with a wonderful appetite. So, I asked my kids if I should read all of the stories, and there's some just enough funny things in here that I wanted to kind of read them all. So read the whole story. So this is a history of Mountain Green. I found this online, and looks like a pretty good story, worth checking out sometime. And so the best I can figure out is this red line here kind of represents the railroad going into Weber Canyon. This is what the highway is. Sinclair's probably around here someplace. And as you can tell, there's lots, the railroad goes across the ways and then crosses the highway to the south-facing slopes. So my guess is it probably came down somewhere off of here. That's my best guess. So in this story, Jim vividly remembered one big avalanche which roared down the steep incline just as a long freight train rolled by. I don't have a year on this one. The slide cut the train in half, carried several boxcars through the river, and deposited them in a tangled heap on the wagon road. It also scooped, listen to this, it also scooped the river bottom clean of rocks and debris, along with a goodly catch of unwary trout lurking in the chilling waters. There were more than enough for a fish fry. So all you fly fishermen and women, there you go. Just start some avalanches and get your fish. Okay. And this is another story I thought was cool. I don't have a year. I think it's probably from the Standard Examiner. So this is in Weber County. A family spent the first winter in a cabin before the spaces between the logs were chinked with adobe. On several occasions, they watched the mountain lions prowl around their cabin and heard them sniff through the cracks. So that's kind of the house these guys are living in. And the dad, one winter, as their food supply, which had been scanty to begin with, became less and less each day. So dad goes out to the mountains to hunt. Sylvester shouldered his gun when hunting up Ogden Canyon. He did considerable climbing on the slopes, trudging through the snow, when suddenly he discovered that he was caught riding on an avalanche. He came swiftly down the incline. He saw the snow ahead fall over the cliff. He realized his own predicament and uttered 3 words aloud: "Lord, help me." The next thing he realized, he was being thrown into a sitting position, and the snow dropped from under his feet as his feet dangled in midair over the cliff. He never remembered how he managed to maintain a grip on his gun. However, when he felt it still in his hand, he reached backward quickly as far as he dared, and with all his strength, thrust the barrel deep into the snow. So if you don't have your ice axe, use your gun. Okay. Thus using it as a brace to inch himself away from the precipice. Tears came into his eyes whenever the incident was mentioned throughout his life. So I like that one a lot. Okay, so we're going to skip forward to 1958. And a lot of you guys know the Deans and Ellison's runs at Snow Basin? You guys, yeah? Okay. So these are 2 runs that are close to John Paul Lift, okay? And Lincoln Ellison here was Dr. Ellison, it's my understanding. He was the skier that was caught first, and Tony Dean was the rescuer. So this story is more than just an avalanche accident. This is a rescue party leaving the resort, like many of us do, okay, going out to do a search and rescue out of bounds, and the rescuer was killed. And this story, my understanding, was used. I wasn't taking avalanche classes back in the 60s and 70s, but my understanding is that National Ski Patrol and other organizations use this as an example of what not to do. And here's a picture on the papers here. I threw a couple pictures in from the Ralph Johnson collection because I think it kind of helps to show you the era. So this is kind of some folk ski touring. I just read a book from Dolores LaChapelle, Ed LaChapelle's wife, and she was talking about touring at Alta, and they had skins, but they didn't have, their heels weren't free. So I think that some of the gear at the time was you're kind of shuffling, like thinking alpine gear with leather boots, but no free heels. And I think some of the maybe wealthier people, or maybe the newer gear, eventually they had better gear for that. So these guys are hardcore. Like if you're going ski touring, then like you really want to be out there. Ray Nye, which was the ski patrol director at the time, was involved in this rescue. And here's a photo, I believe, of him in this photo. This, again, another picture of their gear. And this is what toboggans were like then. So the patrollers left the top of Porky lift, which I believe was a rope tow at the time, and traversed across John Paul Face with a toboggan like this. And Bob Chambers, a local person, he was involved in this, Earl Miller, Ed Mendel, and many others. So this again is an example. It's kind of a Stokes basket on a toboggan. And if you look closely, it's a special kind of toboggan. The Todd-boggan. So I never heard of that till today, but I love it. So, okay. This is a very complicated event. I'm not going to go into all the details of this, but I'm going to try to give some just kind of some basic things here. We have some great photos. So at the time, you got Wildcat lift here, Porky lift here. My understanding is that the party, let's see, we'll read a little bit about here. So between, this is 1958, between the 3rd and 8th of March, the weather at Snow Basin was good. Sounds like GR was given the morning weather. It was good. No new snow fell in this period, and a hard crust formed on the surface on the old snow. On 8th of March, a severe storm moved into the area, dropping 6 inches of new snow. Oh, that's Forest Service, and 10 inches on John Paul Jones Ridge. So back then, it wasn't just JP or John Paul; it was John Paul Jones, the full name. So maybe we should go back to that. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, high winds accompanied the storm, created snow slab conditions on the northerly exposed slope. Warm temperatures that existed during the first part of the storm. I didn't remember this or know this till today when I was reading this. The first part of the storm, and it's approximately 2 inches of pellet snow, so grauple, was deposited right on the hard crust with relatively warm. As the storm continues, temperatures drop, bringing an 8-inch layer of powder snow. So kind of a typical spring storm, right? Comes in warm, southwest flow, get a bunch of grauple with frontal passage. It turns cold, gets snow on top, and then it got windy. So let's see. So these guys are heading out from top of Porcupine, probably hiked up the staircase, it looks like, and made their way to the top of Easter Bowl. All were experienced in touring, having toured in the same general area for years. It was their first time that all 4 had skied together. Originally, the men had intended to tour at Brighton. However, on calling the lodge there, they learned that heavy new snows made touring in the area hazardous. So instead, they went to Snow Basin. So kind of interesting. The 4 stopped to eat in a shelter of fir trees just below the ridge top, overlooking the last cirque to the north of Mount Ogden. So I'm pretty sure they were sitting up here kind of where we would sit on Sweet, top of No Name, maybe not close to the gate on Easter Bowl, and they're probably enjoying a nice view of the cirque. Looks like it cleared up during their lunch. The northwest wind broke, which had been very strong and allowing good visibility. And they started their descent. And on their descent, they skied down Easter Bowl. And I want to thank, Mike Jenkins has passed away. He was snow safety director at Snow Basin and Powder Mountain. And this is a presentation that he had put together. So just want to give credit to him. So this is the route coming down. And this is the John Paul lift line right here, top of Ellison slide right here. So Dr. Ellison Triggers is caught and buried in the first avalanche. Group heads down. Group splits. So they send one skier, M, back for assistance, and others continue to look for Dr. Ellison. On his way out, M triggers and is caught in a second slide, but is able to continue. And he gets back out to actually the rock garden at Snow Basin, close to Bottom Porky, and is able to call for help. So rescue parties make their way in. They've got 2 teams that are going in. So back then, not great communication, right? No radios. So they got a lower team and an upper team. The upper rescue party triggers a 3rd avalanche. So they're coming in up here, and there's a little more to the story. You guys should actually read this. It's a great account. Lots of details that we're kind of skipping through here. But he's caught and gets out of that slide. But lower down, the lower group is crossing that avalanche path one at a time. And Tony Dean is crossing the path when that slide comes down. So a rescuer triggers a slide on another rescuer, and Tony Dean is buried. I wanted to show these photos. So let's see. This is the diagram that's in the Snowy Torrents. And it's really great. It shows there's just a lot going on here. But one of the reasons they were able to get this much detail is because this had to have happened the next day. The Forest Service had an aerial flight department at the time, and they flew over top of this area and took aerial photos. And it had to have been the next day, unless it was, I don't think it could have possibly been the same day. And it's really amazing. You can see, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. So this is roughly where the John Paul lift line is today. You can see the tracks going in. This is the upper rescue team going into the slide path that Upper Deans that came down and killed Tony Dean. You can see the tracks going here, which I think is amazing that we actually have that kind of a record and how they were able to put this back together. And same thing here, you could see rescue parties coming in. My guess is that this was Tony Dean's track in. It could have been lower going into cross here. So this is where they found Dr. Ellison. So they found Tony Dean, and this is probably the rescue crew either going out or maybe down the gully. Yeah, and so lots here for you guys if you want to read. I think there's like a 10-page write-up on this if you want to get some more details on this. The other thing that I think is remarkable about this is this was 1958, so quite a few decades ago. This is what the terrain looks like today, or this is actually even almost 15 years ago now. So Avalanche Atlas Time, GR 2006, 8, I think, these photos. And you know, I've been away from Snow Basin. I'm in a pass there for 7 years. And whenever I ride the lift, you guys probably used to it every day, but when I ride John Paul, it looks so thick to me now. Like the trees are just growing and growing, getting bigger and bigger. And it's amazing to me to look back at this photo and just how alpine this looks. There's a little bit of history to that too, and not for tonight, but I think a lot of the mountains were burned by fire, erosion, grazing, and obviously cut for lumber. There's a mill at Wheeler's. So I think all that played into it. And then there was actually I found some information on them planting trees to kind of help regrow it. This is back early, maybe 1940s. So some of these trees may have not been that old at the time and were replanted. So anyways, just kind of an interesting side fact that's one of the first things I noticed. Yeah, anyways, so this is Dean's slide right here. And I mean, right there's kind of the same thing. These trees are just super tiny. Okay, so there's a bunch of newspaper articles. Again, I think this will be on the YouTube. Maybe you can just pause it and read these, or you can look these up or find me. I'll be happy to send them to you. So there's a bunch of articles, well documented. All right. So we're going to jump forward to 1964. So a thing that I think is remarkable about the history of avalanches and events around Snow Basin. So as in 1958, you have a ski patroller. I'm not sure. Was Tony Dean a patroller? Do you guys know? I just know he's part of the rescue party, so I don't know. But someone in the rescue party was killed. And then 6 years later, 1964, Lawrence Allen was a young assistant snow ranger for the Forest Service. And he goes out with his supervisor at the time, or the two of them were going out together doing their work. And he is killed as well. So Allen Peak at Snow Basin, Allen Peak Tram is named for this person, Lawrence Allen. That's one of the reasons I wanted to share these, because these are names that you guys see on trail maps. We all talk about Mount Allen, you know, lots between the tram and other things. So just kind of put a little story behind that. So let's see. All right, so here's a photo showing Allen Peak, approximate Allen Peak Tram, and then Mount Ogden. So the story goes, two Snow Basin snow rangers, accompanied by a doctor and his son, on a proposed tour over the top of Mount Ogden and down Taylor Canyon into Ogden. So my guess is that they left from the top of Porky and they talk about going through the saddle. So I'm guessing they left Porky, went to the saddle, and they're making their way in here. Okay, the two rangers intended to inspect the west-facing slopes for avalanche hazard and determine if they were advisable for skier use. At 4 o'clock, the party had climbed to the saddle near Mount Ogden, so I'm pretty sure that's right there. And the route proposed by AR ran near the ridge dividing Taylor Canyon and Mainlands Basin. I'm not sure if it's this subridge or this, but regardless, they were making their way through here. I think this is a very safe route down through the middle of this. And my guess is they came here, and then it says the two rangers were traveling behind the party in front and approaching the Taylor Canyon drainage, Mainlands Basin ridge. AR and his son deviated from the planned safe route without consulting the rangers. They crossed the slope and dropped into Taylor's Canyon drainage on a north-facing slope. Oops. So they basically got off track, did a traverse, and this is, you know, where I would ski to get in here. I'm guessing this is approximately where they ended up. they got on this north-facing terrain here. And I'm sure a lot of you guys in this room have skied this. I had skied this prior to knowing about this accident, so I think it was interesting to go back and figure out where it was. Let's see. So we'll go to here for just a second. So, okay, the Rangers immediately warned the danger of entering this area and they shouted a warning. The warning apparently was not heard. So the Rangers are trying to help this group of people. So they know that they're in danger. They've crossed over the ridge. They're on this slope in here. And the Rangers are basically trying to catch up and say, get out of here before anything bad happens. And let's see. So practicing the safety precautions they had been caught, the Rangers skied to the protection of a large tree. PJ stopped above the tree and his partner below. At the same time, AR and his son realized the slide danger and also stopped. They were located about 15 feet out and 15 feet below the two Rangers. So my guess is that this is the lower two group and the upper two group is right there. So the two Snow Rangers above, the two Tours below. And so they decided to go back up. And while attempting to do a kick turn, Ranger PJ felt and saw the snow directly in front of him and above AR start to move. He yelled for the party to grab a tree. When he saw that AR and his son were already engulfed in the slide, shouted to them, swim for your lives. The slide lasted approximately 50 seconds, which is kind of a long slide. Okay, so this is, and then this is what I think happened. So the slide goes all the way down here. So they don't know where he's at. So they start a rescue. I'm not going to get into the details of the rescue, but they started a rescue there. They can't find him. Somebody goes to town, alerts everyone, and they got to hoof it out of Ogden back up here. Some of them snowshoes, some of them don't. And it takes some, it says the three rescue parties had extremely difficult time reaching the scene of the accident. So no kidding. That's a big, big haul to get up there. On the morning of, so they go up there. Looks like I think there's an injury from one of the rescuers here. Got some photos. So what happens is the next morning, a helicopter and experienced personnel from the Wasatch National Forest, Alta, Park City, local Forest Service, and Ski Patrol here in Ogden came out. And at 12:45, they were able to find Lawrence Allen with the probe line. And so this is about where he was found. And that red dot kind of shows there. So I also want to point out, many of you guys are familiar, and I think some of you probably knew Ryan Smedley, and he was caught in this slide path up here. The two of these have the same confluence down at the bottom, two very large paths from different directions. All right, so we're going to jump over to Farmington, 1965, okay? You're going to see a theme here, okay? So some more employees. So January 29th, 1965, two researchers, RJ and RD, left the Farmington Experimental Station. Chad, USGS probably, maybe Forest Service. Anyways, so this guy's going out to take snow course measurements in Farmington Canyon. After leaving their trucks at Hollingworth Creek, the foresters continued on two newly acquired power toboggans. They had skis on these toboggans, so I'm guessing they were snowmobiles. Okay. The 2 men had traveled, let's see. The 2 men had traveled, I'm going to go through this one fairly briefly, but the 2 men traveled about 500 yards off the main road. A small slide hit RJ, or RD, sorry, and RJ went out of sight without observing what had happened. And so suddenly, so he's basically caught in a small slide with his power toboggan. And then a much larger slide started to tumble towards him. So his first impulse was to run, but before he could move, he was caught in the avalanche. Feeling as if he was riding a large wave, he was carried a considerable distance up the opposite slope. And I want to point out, like, I'm reading from the Snowy Torrents. This was put together by some folks, most of them in Colorado, and they're just great records. They're really well researched, and that's how we have a lot of these old accounts, because probably no one locally would have documented this as well. And that's all. So they did have again, I'm not going to get into the rescue of this one, but basically two workers again caught in the slide. All right, where does this take us to? 65. So now this is that story. Okay. So this is a story that I asked a lot of questions about because I kept hearing rumors. This is one of the reasons I wanted to do this talk. Has any of you guys ever heard about an artillery shell going over the divide in the North Ogden? Anybody? Okay, well, it really happened. But it took me like a decade to figure out that that actually really happened. So this is an example of the artillery. It was a 75 millimeter recoilless rifle, is my understanding. And the Forest Service, in conjunction with the ski patrols, you guys all know this, I think, do avalanche control at various resorts throughout the country and highway programs. And so this is a standard, some of the standard equipment of that day. And so apparently at the time, I'm kind of adding a little bit to this to try to describe the best that I'm aware of here is, it sounds like they had an issue in North Ogden Divide, and so they brought one of these rifles over there, and may have been truck, I'm guessing a truck mounted, drove it over there. Probably, this is my best guess, drawing a line through here, is it kind of, and they probably shot it near your barn, Rosie. Yeah, so yeah, so your family's been involved in more things than I'm aware of around here, so. Yeah, exactly. So I'll check with your dad on that. So this pin here is probably what they're trying to shoot around here, you know, some of the cornices that form on the divide to protect the highway. So somewhere over here, this line, they shot it, and basically, I think what I read is they shot it and they didn't hear it go off, so they thought it was a dud. Kind of just moved on. And it can be tricky. One of the reports I thought is that there was reports of it ricocheting. It may have actually shot through the snow. So if you have a big enough cornice, it could actually go through right to the other side. And maybe, anyways, so I think there was a whole bunch of reporting and research done on this, but we're not going to cover that. We're just going to cover what was in the newspaper. A house down here in North Ogden that we probably have all driven by, if you've driven over the divide, is right on 3100 North, I think. There is a house under construction, and it got a hole in the roof. And thankfully, no one was living in that home. But next door, across the street, this little boy was watching television. So here's the story. U.S. Forest Service officials began probing late Friday into why an artillery shell that was meant to diffuse avalanches instead damaged 3 North Ogden homes. 4 persons in the residence of Mr. and Mrs. Jean, I'll leave the address out here, but it's 3100 North, were taken by a fragment from the 75 millimeter shell that penetrated the house after exploding through the roof of a home across the under construction across the street. So this little boy, 11 years old, okay, he got up to change the channel on the TV. Now, some of you guys may not know this, but you used to have to get up and walk over and turn the channels on the television. We didn't have like voice activation or remote or anything, okay? So little boy gets up, goes to the TV, and while he's at the television, he was changing the channels when the shrapnel pierced the couch on which he'd been sitting. Pretty amazing. And this photo here is he's pointing to the hole in the glass. I don't know if you can see it real well, but this is broken glass. That's where the shrapnel came into their house. TV though, right? TV was okay. Yeah, as far as I know. And a couple of the things, quotes from others is Michael said, "I'm just glad I'm alive." Okay. And he said, "I heard this big explosion and saw a cloud of dust coming into the house." So pretty exciting morning for this little boy. There's another shot of the damage in the house there. Okay, so we're going to fast forward to 1978. A little boy named Michael, 13 years old, was playing in the foothills. So going up close, probably Douglas Avenue. Does that sound right for jump off? Anybody? Going up Jump Off Canyon, east of 400 North there, but survived by jumping. So he was trapped in a snow avalanche, and he survived by jumping behind a column of rocks and burying a breathing hole in the snow. And then the next line here is, "It's easy to understand why youngsters and oldsters too enjoy hiking in the foothills and along the ridges of the mountains." So I don't know, they're kind of jumping around this article. But here's some photos from that event, and I'm going to read a little more. It says, "Buried under 7 feet of snow, 13-year-old Michael Colburn was still able to mutter a little prayer. I said, "Get me out of here, God." And it worked. While hiking with a friend in Jump Off Canyon Saturday afternoon, Michael Coburn was swallowed by an avalanche. Officials estimate 100 feet, 150 feet long and 30 feet wide. I was scared at first, then saw some light and started to dig up, Michael said, from his bed in the St. Benedict's Hospital, emergency room later. Yeah. So kind of just, there's going to be another one of these, just someone in the foothills. It doesn't take a lot when conditions are right to get in trouble, even just from, downtown Ogden. This is in a ski area, and I believe this was in bounds, but I think Frank was okay. You hear Frank? Frank make it? I think he was okay with me showing this because it was an interesting piece of history. So there used to be a house at the bottom of John Paul Face. It used to be the bottom of the Porky Lift, is my understanding. And it was called the Huntington House, or Hoss. It was partially buried by an avalanche that roared down a run at Snow Basin, the John Paul Face. And the next photo is Scott Wilson cleaning up a mess left by the tree that slammed through one wall. So there's the mess from the avalanche. And you guys know H&H Flats at Snow Basin? This is about where it's at. That's why it's called H&H. Okay, so a little more in the article. It says, an avalanche roared down the John Paul Run at Snow Basin Thursday morning and heavily damaged the Huntington House at the base of the Porcupine Lift. No one was hurt. The impact from tons of snow sent an evergreen through the wall of the house and out the other side. So pretty substantial. The firing of a 75 millimeter recoilless rifle used as a control gun triggered the slide. So, and I don't know the history after this, but eventually the lift was replaced and put down lower, and sometime in there, the Huntington House was removed. And I think part of it was because of this damage. Is that right, Kay? Is that maybe why they pulled it out? Okay. Okay, and Kay, if you want to get ready here. So I did some, talked to Nicole and Keith Moore, former patrol director at Powder Mountain, about a slide that occurred in, 1985, February. This is along the Powder Mountain Road. This is out of bounds in Powder Country. And as I was researching this and finding some information out, just literally in the last 48 hours, I discovered that Kate Chapman, longtime EMS fire captain here in the Valley, former Powder Mountain Patrol Director and former Snow Basin Patroller for many years. He was the first responder to this accident. So I'm going to invite Kay to come up and give his perspective on this accident.
Oh. Hear me? You hear me all right? Okay, here we go. Yeah, Kay Chapman, live up in the valley and raised a family up there and worked with Weber Fire District for 30 plus years. And we were hunting a part-time job in the winter and we thought we'd go up to Powder Mountain and ran into Chuck Panner up there and was asking him about getting on the ski patrol. And I remember his first questions. Well, do you have any medical background? And I said, well, we're firemen. Oh, you're hired. Well, don't you want to see a ski? Nope. Okay. Anyway, I worked at Powder for quite a while, and through that time, I advanced into the patrol director. Most of the patrollers there were firemen, and of course, firemen have three shifts, A, B, and C, and so people were off at different times. Fire service, you only work 10 or 11 days out of the month then, and you'd have 4 days in a row off and 6 days in a row off. So perfect job to work second jobs. Anyway, we went up there and got on, and I love seeing all you guys because it was the same rowdy bunch. Only I get to be one of them. And I learned so much from the crazy guys up there, just tagging along and listening to them and going on the routes. learning about Powder Mountain. And of course, over the years, and it was a seasonal job, and so they'd come and go, and you might not see them no more. But when I got in the patrol director job, I was pretty hesitant. I said, you know, you need to have someone here full time, but Chuck wanted me to do it. And anyway, so I went ahead and did it. And I was always pretty scared because there was so much activity at Powder Mountain and so many different areas up there that I was unfamiliar with. And I remember in the summer, I'd go and hike all over the backside of the Powder Country, and I found all kinds of things, like a big flat slide or big flat rock, right even with the grade up from the pump house. How many seen that? Yeah, well, nothing but that's a slider. And anyway, and think about this, there was just the 3 lifts, you know, Sundown and Timberline and Hidden Lake. So we had 2 at Sundown, and we had 4 at Timberline, 4 at Hidden Lake. And that was patrol. And one of the big things is all of those that work at Powder or know the road, that they were just wanting to get that road up right now, you know. And that was one of our first bombing routes whenever we went up and did control work. As you know, the backside comes off of Hidden Lake on one side, and then it comes off Sundown on one side. Have you heard the word or the nickname run called Sounder? Okay, Sounder is a bombing route off Dead Horse Point. And the reason we named it that is we'd do air blasts there and hang it in Dr. Cobabe's trees, which we would have been in trouble because we blew that tree up I don't know how many times. Finally got down to no branches, and we try and at least get 3 feet and do a sound blast. But that piece, I could probably name 7 or 8 times, wolfed on us when we're just going out to there. And it just, you know, wolfing snow, if you felt it and heard it, is that, and it's frightening, you know. And of course, we'd get out there, and so then we'd hang those bombs in there and do a lot of air blasts like that. This particular day here, we did some control work about a week before. The backside face there, down to the borderline and straight down to the shuttle pickup, was heavily skied out, and then any new little storms come in that it was so ski cut that it wouldn't slide much, you know. It just absorb and go in there. Well, this particular time, these 2 guys were skiing the backside, and then it was all tracked out, and so they wanted to, and on the Hidden Lake side, they wanted to venture out farther, which they did. Now, Powder Mountain Road, you go up there. Oh, I didn't know that was it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We call that the gray wall there. And it's a pretty big drop.
Push that. Push that right there. Oh, the top right there.
You
The
hold
white
it down.
button. Just push the white button. There you go.
Anyway, this wall right here, and then the shuttle pickup's about right up here. So you know the area. And this is the little Wolf Creek stream that comes down. As it advances here, as you can see, it drops and carves out this little gully here. And so the road is up above here at a pretty good height above the gully here. Well, these guys, so there's tight forest, as you can see up here. But then it comes down into open forest. Open forest, of course, these trees. This was in February, and the snow was, it was the end of February, pretty much. We had high sun. So there's a lot of radiant heat. This exposure here is facing west. So it got a lot of heat in there that going in, radiant heat in and radiant heat out around. And then of course, as you know, how it rots around to these open trees and things like that. But the snowpack itself was in pretty good condition, other than they came down, and so they're past the shuttle, and there was usually a traverse back. But as you can see, there's not much powder to ski in here. This is basically a train trap, as you know, mainly because you've got that road right there, and it's going to jam. So anyway, they had made a run, took the shuttle up, and I think the shuttle driver saw them and says, you guys can't go back there. We never ever threw bombs here. We bombed all this all the time. But this was out of bounds. And then with the heavy forest, it pretty much tended itself. And they came down and they could see this rock wall and knew where they were. And they'd already come through there. And this is middle of the day. They're ski cutting. One's high, one's low, and the lower one went in.
Is that better? Do you want the other photo?
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah. Well, the Daniels kid, he went in first to traverse back to the shuttle, to the road. So he's already made a little shear cut right there. And then the Beacon kid, he comes in and it releases. And it picks him up. It's kind of a medium, it's not a hard slab, it's a slab avalanche, but it stayed on the bed of the slab stayed the same all the way down. I remember looking at that. So it didn't pick up or dive deeper because it was just straight. Well, the problem with it is, let's go back to that other one.
Yep.
He come down, and right down in here and there is the road that is up higher. So he comes down and he gets churned in right here, down in here, right by the road. They got the X there, but it's really.
I was going to say, can you tell us where the X is? So where it should be.
I had just come off the backside with some people, just showing them around out of town. And I was right there by the shuttle, and a car pulled up and a kid jumped out. And I believe it was a Daniels kid, the one that survived it, and says, "Hey, my buddy's buried down here." So I jumped in the car and we drove down there. So this car was driven by another guy, of course. And you got to remember this, that he was on the other side of the avalanche before it hit the road, because when it came down, it buried that gully and then churned up and blew right over the road and shut the road down. So anyway, I took him back down there with me and basically tried to size it up from there, and called in 2 patrollers off Hidden Lake, 2 off of Sundown, and called for the probe poles to come. So everything was kind of in order, and we were looking around. We found 1 ski, I remember, and then a lot of debris from the forest. Not big limbs or anything, but it was down in the snow a little bit. We did a hasty search there when one of the other patrollers got there, and without probe poles. We were just kind of our ski poles, but doing a hasty search around the ski area that was found, and of course really talking to the Daniels kid. "Where's the last time you saw him?" And he says, pretty much put us in this area here. We're standing right here, and you can see all the way up the head wall, the crown. It was maybe, I don't know exactly, but I just from visual down there, it was maybe about 18 inches. And remember, this is old unskied snow right here. So it's been going through everything from grapple to hoarfrost to whatever. during the loading time. So, and then all this is ski cut. And funny thing is, over on that side, when we did do our routes over there, we threw 5 bombs usually on the backside there, and just got straight black holes all through there. And then the week progressed, and we were real comfortable with the backside running. And so anyway, because they did that, they came down to this new snow. And then think about it, around all the tree wells and the west exposure this way, and now that time of the year, high sun, you can see what's happening to the snow in different sections of that path around the tree well and thing like that. But they released it released on him. And he came down, and like I said, he was buried right here under about, when we found him, he was, if you can picture being in a recliner back and one arm up like this and under about 2 feet of snow. And then of course his body was down lower. We finally got the probe team down there, and Theron Palmer, he was the volunteer patrol director. He was up there, and he set up a fine probe going on, but we were still doing a little hasty search in there with the conduit probes, just in the areas where maybe. It's probably the best, how do you say this? If you had to work an avalanche, this was probably the simplest and easiest, because the road's right there. I mean, of course, not for the patient, but the road's right there. The snow is stopped. It's not a giant. It was maybe 50 feet wide. And anyway, everything stopped right down there at the bottom and then shot up on the road. So we started probing through there, and we had a hit down in the snow, and then we started going around different ends to see if we'd get a stop here, here, and here. Anyway, we stopped and dug right there. And we thought it was a green piece of the pine tree sitting there, but it was a green glove. And so we reached down and boom, there's his hand. Now this is something, this has happened 3 times to me in different aspects. I was in the avalanche search over on Cutler Basin, the helicopter crash at Powder. But when you pull out a hand, or that's all you've got, you really don't know whether is he that way or that way. You don't know if it's left or right. It's just this way. Sorry. Share item. Anyway, you just start digging down, and of course, it was his left arm and bent, and he had a little bit of trauma there to his face. The snow was red. We dug down and got his head out. And remember, this is what you're going to see. And I've seen this on the 2 avalanches I've been on that were fatal. They are snow in their mouth, snow up their nose, snow in their ears. Sometimes both of them had their eyes open, full of snow, completely like this. This is on maybe a, not one of them suffocation deals and the ice mask and that stuff. This was just a traumatic injury or injury from the slide. He died from that instantly. But anyway, I always carried about 4 or 5 airways, different sizes in my pack. And then we all had those breathing masks that you could put on. So I put a 6 tube in him and started breathing him, and had to clear his airway out. And he would expel the air right back out because he was so tight in there. We knew he was really tight in there. One thing I noticed right off, his trachea was deviated like this. And we dug down, and of course, people started coming and coming. And so a lot of help. We dug down. We also had the rescue truck up there, right at the other. So there's another thing I was telling you about. The rescue truck is not even 20 feet from the guy. It's parked right there on the road on the other side. We also ordered up a helicopter, Life Flight. They landed down there at Wolf Creek, and that was ready to go. So we're working the kid, but when they got down to his chest, he was able to take in air and still using the pocket mask with the airway and working him there. And then it took a while to dig clear down and get him completely out of there. But during that part of the rescue there, his color started to come back a little bit. He wasn't fixed and dilated. These pupils were coming in, and we packaged him up real quick, put him in that rescue, and they took him down to the helicopter and of course, intubated him from there, and then flew him down to McKay. And he didn't make it, of course, but there's a situation, even if he had a beacon on, I think we just stumbled onto him. Just everything went right, and unfortunate what it was. But anyway, there's several events that I've been on, and one of the main things back in our day there, we didn't have any kind of debriefing teams. Have anybody been in a debriefing? Okay, well, you need more going. A debriefing team is to go through all the people. And when we had the helicopter crash up on top of Powder, or up on James, just down at James, they were doing a professional it was a marker binding commercial. And these folks, so they were from out of state, they were professional skiers. One team would get dropped off by the heli, and they would ski down with their camera gear down into Cache off the backside north, while the other ones at the bottom were being picked up and brought back up, and at the right up there where the heli site was. And then this team had 5 people on the bird, the 2 in the front, 3 in the back. And this guy that was flying, the Mickelson guy, this guy was good. He did three tours in Vietnam, and very good pilot. But he didn't want to land on that snowpack, so he would hover, and then together, the 2 outside guys, the doors would open, they'd stand up and step out. And then the rest could get out. Well, that happened. One guy stood up and it tilted, and the other guy went back in his seat, so there's 2 there. And so the bird started hovering like this. Well, Mickelson just picked up and dove right out of there, went right down the big Wolf Creek draw, and made a bank turn to come back up to the Powder Mountain parking lot area, or up to the LZ. So one kid is in the snow, and Craig Olson was his name, and he's got a radio, and he hears a thump. Something happened down there. This is in the latter part of the day. It's like 4 o'clock. It's 0 degrees, clear skies like we have, big full moon out, and they don't return back. So he's able to radio. Well, then, the whole chain gets going there, and everybody is getting search and rescue, and they got a helicopter out of Tooele, one of them big Huey Vietnam ones with the big doors that open, and they had a massive light that could show. 3 of us geared up, Lee Shushman, a doctor, and myself and Brad Miller from Powder Patrollers picked up, and then we went up over there, and I flew up with him with that big light, and I knew that area real well where what they were doing. I says, let's just light up this side. And we found the bird laying on its side. The door popped off. It looked like a body laying right there. And but the whole bird was intact. So let's see, I was just with them then we went back over and got Miller and Lee and went back over and traversed into this above James, not above James, but above the site. And that was pretty scary. We talk about frog hopping and being careful, you know, as you're crossing unsettled snow and things like that, where you're a little worried. We did that, and we had substantial activity with the snow during the week there. So, and James was, oof. Anyway, we traversed over and then got down to the bird, and one kid was laying in the snow, and another funny thing there, his hand is like this, and his eyes are open, and he is fixed and dilated, and it's cold. He's got hoarfrost here all over his face, and checking his pulse. And this is another thing. You're cranked up when you get on some of these things, you know, and so we're checking his, you know, maybe he's just way deep into hypothermia. He wasn't really busted up bad, but anyway, we checked him there. And then Lee come down, the doctor, and he says, hey, I think we better check him with a stethoscope. And I says, I think you're right, because I can feel my pulse, you know, and I'm not reading this real well. Well, anyway, just back through the whole scene, 4 people died. Let's see, 4 people died. 1 survived that got off, and they were from all over the country. And the dispatchers, the word got out, and the dispatchers were getting pounded by phone calls and things coming into to them, and we want to need to know who was on there. Our boys on there. This. They were out of Park City when they came, and it was a marker commercial that they were doing. Anyway, long story short, we checked them real careful. It was kind of frightening around the helicopter just from the fire service, because I could smell all this jet fuel in the snow there. And Mickelson, and I'll never forget this with him, and I knew him. He's sideways, still in his belt, and in his hand is the control unit, broke off. He rode that in like a wild bull, just boom. Anyway, we checked them all. There was no rescue. We came back out. The Huey came and took us back to Powder Mountain. And then, long story short, there was so many people involved in this rescue. I don't know if he was like in 90, I'm thinking. They got a big debriefing team. We all had to be debriefed, and we went in and they locked the doors, and the room had a circle of people, and they went to each one asking what their part was. And it was amazing. We had no, you know, you're the rescue guy, and you're hearing stuff from the dispatchers that are trying to get information, and they're yelling at them, and people calling and all kinds. Then the search and rescue guys, they went in the next day in the morning and got to the site there. And anyway, there was some young kids in the rescue. The one kid, he quit right off, but he really got clobbered. You think you're really tough, you know, and you are, but you see these things, and maybe later on, that's why I can tell these stories, because they're still stuck and welded right here. I know almost everything to them, and I see them I pass by them. If I go to Powder Mountain, the beacon halfway up, right, and you might want to go there. Let's see, about right here or here, his folks came out and brought a gravestone, and it's up under one of those pine trees. And they've got an old Schaefer beer there that he loved, and just things hanging, and people. It's just a quiet place. It's a quiet place. But anyway, what happened to me, I did well with the debriefings usually. And then well, the deputy of the search and rescue team, Jack Miller, he's by me, and I start telling my part and about the thing, and he throws it to me, and I grab it, and then I was not good. I just grabbed onto it, but I was not good. And I knew I had to tell what I knew, but it was, the debriefing is critical. Critical. You may debrief your own little patrollers. You have a horrific event or something that's not right, get in there and talk and talk and talk. And what could we have done? What should we have done? And what didn't we do? And then when you're all not done talking, what I would do, and I do it with my fire crew, because we didn't have debriefing teams other than this one. That was the first one I had been in. We'd talk on some of the big traumas we went on in the fire service. And finally I says, okay, anybody got anything else? And then I said, okay, I'm gonna unplug it. And I just would unplug it. And I says, now, this is gonna start haunting you clear for till when, but remember, we talked about this. We talked about this. And we were okay with, especially with the input. So just a little advice for an old dog like me, that it worked. It worked to some degree. And you were all brothers in the ski industry. We were brothers in the fire. And you got to look out for each other. And I'm talking too long, aren't I?
I love what you're talking about.
And it's a world of good to help each other. One of the best things for me is my wife was an ER, my wife worked as a nurse on the surgical floor. And so I'd have a bad day and I'd come back and we'd talk, we'd debrief. And then she comes home, she lost a patient, and she's crying, and we'd talk. And anyway, it was a good setup. But like I said, on this avalanche, it was pretty much an easy thing to do. Everything fell in place. The rescue came fast. He was probably under the snow, maybe, I don't know, 45, 35 minutes before he was found. They worked him all the way down to the bird. They got at the ER, and I know they worked him there. I'm not sure if I'm told you, I thought we called it canoeing when they opened you up and did internal massage, CPR, just on the heart. But they worked him and then called it down there. But all these things just fell into place, and it was a good learning experience for me, and it kept me really humble. Let me say something about Snow Basin, because I love Snow Basin, but when I was at Powder, I was scared because of the control work. And the thing I was scared about is all my crew. And I thought, man, if somebody gets buried or something happens here. And GR, I don't know if you remember, I would call Snow Basin and get on the horn with Tom and just says, you know, this is so-and-so. And I says, I'm just wondering what kind of activity you guys have been having on the hill and what your weather is and what aspects, you know. He was so kind to me, so kind. And I might even talk to you once. I don't know. Sometimes I'd talk to someone, but they were so nice. And they'd tell me, but I thought, okay, I hang up. And them guys over there are idiots. You know? And we were. And do you still wolf pack at Powder Mountain? You know what wolf packing is? Everybody takes off at the same time. Nobody's on top. Oh, they're wolf packing again. If you did that at Basin, what happened, Gert? Well, if you were caught, you got 6-pack, right? And if you didn't get that beacon out in 3 minutes, boom, you're buying a 6-pack. Yeah. I loved going to Basin. When I got over there, I I says, I just want to be a volunteer and I want to be as far back on the bus. Give me a hill assignment and I'm good. And it was so great. And I'd learned so much over the phone, believe it or not. Anyway, I appreciate talking to you. I think all of you guys are, geez, I'm just an old dog now. Do you want me to talk about that?
If you want to reckon, how about
Yeah.
you're going to talk to us briefly?
I'll do whatever you want.
Let's do. I'll go through real quick.
Oh, yeah. That'd be great.
So okay. So
Yeah. Remember, that's a big wet slide. And remember, I tell you.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So we got. We're gonna. Kay was involved in 2 more things, so we're just gonna flip to the next here. And I just want to say thanks so much, Kay. And really, I think the value in a lot of this is transferring knowledge from folks like Kay down to those of us that haven't been here as long. And I really appreciate him coming to talk about this. So, so this is another incident Kay was involved with on the Powder Mountain Road. And we'll try to wrap this up here pretty quick, guys. So this is February 1986. And my understanding, Kay was actually driving up the road and helped several people on the way up Powder Mountain Road. A group of people were hit by a slide, trapped in the car. He helped them get up, moved on to another, well, I think on foot, right? Walked up, helped some other people, and they worked their way back on foot, back to the sundown, I believe. And then did some control work and came down. And what happened, so they're working on their way up, lots of slides hitting the road. They come down to do control work. And what stuck out to me on this is, there's all kinds of slides and all kinds of different paths. I'm not going to get into the details here, but the slide ran full path. One of them hit the opposite road bank, continued down SR 158 Powder Mountain Road for about a quarter mile. So it hit the road and kept going about a quarter mile down the road. This is where we drive. Up to 30 feet of debris was deposited on the road, consisting of snow, mature trees, and large boulders. It took 2 days to clear a 1-lane path on the road through the debris. And one thing that Kay told me earlier today was that there's this event that we kind of heard stories about. This is the event here. In order to clear the road, they actually had to drive heavy equipment up and over cars that were buried to get a path made so they could at least get up and down with some of this heavy equipment. So this is a really big slide. This is, like there's some people standing right here for scale. This is a really big piece of equipment. That's the loader there. Not a great photo, but this is, Ogden Valley down here. This is the North Ogden Divide for perspective. So this is farther down. And some of you Powder Mountain folks are going to know these paths a lot better. What's the name of that, Nicole? Do you know that one?
It's now called JP's.
This one is?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Didn't realize that. So, okay. So that is a lot of snow. And I wanted to show this. This is 2017. So back in the day, right, this is, what do we say, 86 on that? Okay, 85 on that one. So even today, modern times, this is 8 years ago now, they're still dealing with this with a modern snow safety program, lots of tools, really good people, really good weather stations, all kinds of stuff. And it's still really hard to separate humans from avalanches. That's just a very challenging thing. And things like this still happen. And moving on, you guys okay? I'll try to fly through. Good?
No, take
Okay.
your time.
Okay. 88. Okay. We're up to 88 here. So only got 10 more years left here. So, okay. So, and there's not too many left here. So this is, I thought this was interesting because I don't know the condition of North Ogden Divide and Trappers Loop in the 80s, but this slide happened and trapped some people in Ogden Valley. So hundreds of skiers and Ogden Valley residents were trapped in the valley Saturday afternoon when melting snow caused a series of avalanches to cover sections of State Road 39. So that's Ogden Canyon Road. Although many people were inconvenienced, no one was injured by the slides. And Ogden Valley businesses, I thought this was funny, Ogden Valley businesses were booming as homebound skiers from Snow Basin, Nordic Valley, and Powder Mountain resorts looked for a place to kill time. You couldn't ask for a better situation for the businesses. Get all the skiers up here and then trap them. So, yeah. The first slide occurred around 2:30 p.m. and closed the road on the south side of Pineview, just east of the spillway. And then, so another larger slide closed, let's see. So we got one south side of Pineview. At the same time, two other slides occurred on the road in the canyon about 3 miles below the dam. And then at 10 p.m., another avalanche about 100 feet long and 30 feet deep covered the highway as well. One of the earlier canyon slides narrowly missed Huntsville resident Nidra Peterson and her children, who were returning home from Ogden. Peterson said she saw the first and largest slide coming down the mountain. She had slowed down when her, so this is like, minivan mom driving cars, driving her kids up the canyon, right? And they'd slowed down when her children screamed, and she noticed another slide coming right at them. We whipped into reverse and got out of there, she says. So, pretty good mom there, I think. And that's a picture. So this is the barrier in Ogden Canyon that we all drive along, and the snow's filling up to there. So I guess they're pretty happy after that. So, okay. So this is Cutler Ridge accident. I'm not going to go. I wasn't planning to go into a lot of detail in this, anyways. Kay was also a responder on this, and I believe some other folks that we all work with. So I'll just briefly hit this, and then I'll encourage you to ask some folks in your patrol, ask some of the old timers, and maybe we'll get some more stories about this one. But North Fork Park here, Ben Lomond, and this is the accident site. And the reason I do want to still cover this is the fact that this is a place that if you're touring on Ben Lomond, everybody walks past this. And I went up there for probably 10 years, and I didn't know where this accident actually happened. And so let's see. So real basic, there was, I think, 4 snowmobiles riding, and 2 people were buried and killed. And we're going to keep it simple like that. This is the accident site. I have another photo here, but the summer trail, you can actually see it really well. See that switchback right there? A lot of people follow the summer trail close on when they skin up. And so a lot of times you come right through here and they make a switchback on the skin track across here because that's where the summer trail is, and I think it's in folks' head. But you're going right below this path. And chances of triggering it from down below are pretty rare, but in areas at times of high danger, I way prefer to come up over here. It's much safer. And that's one thing I want to pass on by talking about this. So it was a very long recovery. The accident happened on the 14th. The first person was found that day, and due to weather and other issues, they didn't find the second person for 9 days. So oh yeah. Yep.
The avalanche right there. He's under about 3 feet of snow. He's laying horizontal. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And his sled there. This is a rock. Hey. Anyway, I thought I'd butt in.
All right, thanks. Okay, anything else that you want to add about it? All right, Kay shared with me a few things which I thought was interesting. One is they had avalanche dogs from, I'm a little up higher, aren't I? There you go. Is that better? Okay. Avalanche dogs from other areas came, and there's a lot of rodents and animals living in these rocks. So the dogs were alerting along the edge of the cliff, and he said their tails are up in there and they're barking and digging and everything, and they were just looking for squirrels, which that's what dogs do. So, and I'm sure they're very disciplined, well-trained avalanche dogs, but squirrels can do that. So, and then the other thing I thought was interesting is Kay was talking about really big blocks of debris in there. Almost think of like a big boulder field going up to middle Garnet Canyon in the Tetons, where you're just climbing through boulders, and it was just big refrigerator blocks of snow and ice when this slide came down. So they were actually yelling into the debris, trying to see if someone was down below that could hear them because there's so much air in between the blocks. So I thought that was really interesting too. And so this is the, did you guys recognize, if you've been up on Ben Lomond, and hopefully you recognize this, the Cutler switchback. Actually, I think that's pretty close. Yeah. So you'll recognize this. That is not the cliff band. Okay. Anyways, I think there might be a better photo there. Anyways, switchback kind of comes right through this area. Let's see. And they had to bring snowcats and scrape off the upper layer of snow, and then probe and scrape off another layer of snow and probe. Helicopters, snowcats, dogs, 65 people, 5 agencies, 2,000 person-hours. It's a really big deal. So wearing a beacon in modern times is a really good thing to do, and it helps people find you if you get caught. Let's see, and this is another photo. This is kind of the big pillow that something similar. This is where the slide originated from. Came down and here they're high marking on here, and then because of the terrain trap in the gully, buried them here. And so this is the summer trail switchback, and I just kind of suggest you guys maybe use the green line over here and avoid that path, especially during high danger. I'm going to skip this one. This is over on Bountiful Peak, but just a couple photos here. This is 96 in December. You can read about it online if you'd like. The Utah Avalanche Center has an excellent repository for accidents all over the state, and a lot of this info I got from there. So in the 98 here, things turned kind of crazy, and we got psycho avalanches. So maybe we'll have to add a new term in swag or something like that for these kind. I don't really know much about them. And then Corey asked me to add this. This was 1998. A student from Weber State went for a hike on the foothills in February. They didn't find him until May. He was found in an avalanche path. Not a lot of information about this, but it's suspected that he was killed from an avalanche. One thing that you'll probably find missing is I don't have a lot of information on North Ogden Divide. And so I didn't get a chance to research that and get some good photos. And we love to talk with any of you that have information on that afterwards. Maybe I can do it another talk, or you can give the talk. But I wanted to throw a few photos in there just to kind of show the potential for North Ogden Divide. And this has been happening for years, sometimes big paths. This was 2009, a big 20-inch storm, I think, in maybe 6 hours. Again, Rosie, this is pretty close to your barn. Yeah, so just want to show the magnitude of what can happen right there on the divide. Big equipment, multi-day closures, lots of work to clean up. There's a few incidents that I did not cover that I'm aware of, and I didn't have time or didn't have information. So in '83, there was an accident and folks hiking from Porky side of Snow Basin across under Mount Ogden Bowl to the top of the now John Paul Lift. It's called the Staircase next to the rock band. It used to be the traditional boot pack. There's a slide there. We also have a couple on North Ogden Divide. 85, a man and truck was trapped, walked out. This is from the Utah Avalanche Center's listing here. 1985, North Ogden on the highway. 1 in the morning, man and woman and a 6-month-old baby. That sounds wonderful. Got trapped in their vehicle in an avalanche and they walked out. Another North Ogden Divide, 3 different gullies ran and buried a large segment of the road. Note was much larger slide than Powder Mountain. I think there was a slide on Powder Mountain the same day. And then another one in Case Creek Canyon, which I think is, it's above Layton. What's the name? The waterfall up there. Adams Canyon. I think it's close to that. 2 snowshoers, broken femur, night rescue near Layton. I wanted to thank a lot of people that I called this week, and I really appreciate your help and your feedback. So GR Fletcher, Frank Wakehart, Nicole, Brian Pollock, I didn't hear back from him, but a lot of his information is in this talk. Keith Moore, former patrol director at Powder Mountain, Kay Chapman, who you heard, Paige Pagnucco of the Utah Avalanche Center, Brandon Everett, he provided all the information on the Cutler Ridge slide. Holly Ahern at Snow Basin, Mike Jenkins, we already mentioned, Bull Brandt, Brian Smith, Corey Davis, Ralph Johnson, and many, many others. And old news, right? 1981. So I like this one a lot. So I'm going to just, let's see real quick. So a few take-homes for me was it used to snow a lot here, especially at the lower elevation. So some of these slides in Ogden Canyon and some of these lower elevations, I just think it's amazing that they had that much snow. Another take home, if you're caught in an avalanche, it helps to pray. Save 2 people. And I would say, you know, especially in periods of high avalanche dangers, something I like to do is, you know, remind your non-avalanche savvy friends, snowshoers, hunters, people like that about avalanches. Small terrain traps on trails in the foothills really can kill you, and it happens a lot in Utah. And, you know, a lot of those people are not going to hear it from anybody except the folks in this room. They might see it on the news. They're probably not checking the avalanche report. But, you know, if you have some good friends, you know they're going to the hills, go tell them. make sure they know. Wear your beacon when driving the local mountain roads in the winter, especially Powder Mountain Road, maybe. Might be a good idea. I know they do a good job, I'm just saying. So, that didn't quite come out right. But I like to, and I again, saying this to this community, for years, being a rescuer, and I had a dog for a bunch of years too. When you're out and about, you're going to have your beacon shovel probe with you. I often would leave a shovel and sometimes a probe in my car during periods of high avalanche danger. Some years when Ogden Canyon does get a lot of snow, it can slide. Things can happen. And, there's all of us spread out around the community. Like the chances are one of you guys might be there. If you have your gear with you, don't necessarily leave it at the mountain. Bring it home, wear your beacon, have your stuff be ready to, help if you're going on the divide or on your way home. So another take home is be good to your dog. You may need them to rescue you someday. Maybe keep a hamburger in your pocket too. So, or a squirrel. I think somebody said that, so that's a good idea. So, I would encourage you guys to write down, document your stories. I moved here in 2000, and I was looking like with JR, looking back at the history. Like I wanted the weather data from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. But we're recording it every day here. So now there's since I've been here, 25 more years of history that we've got. And we're not covering that in tonight's talk, but it's been written down. A lot of you guys, the Snow Safety Ski Patrol programs are doing a really good job recording those. But if you have other stories like Kay shared today, maybe, write them down, get it recorded. And if it's worth sharing, share it with your patrol, but write stuff down so we have good memories and good records and start creating that history for our local community. And I think I said this, but there's a lot of people around you that know these mountains and know the stories. Take the time to get to know them. I'm always amazed at, I'm saying old timers, but people that have been here for decades. There's some amazing people here in the mountains. I've worked with people on the patrol, like, they're Air Force pilots, like flying the jets at Hill, Delta Force, Green Berets. There's some amazing, and nurses and firefighters. I'm going to forget people now that I start doing a list, but there's just such amazing people here. And some people know these mountains so well, and they've been on these events back in the day. They know the stories, and just encourage you when you're hanging out in the top shack, riding a lift, just, pull some of those stories out and try to pass that down. I think a lot of folks start talking when you ask them questions and you're interested. So I think I mentioned this earlier, but if you're here in the Ogden area, less than 10 years, I'd encourage you, it's getting a little late, but I encourage you to look for someone that looks like they've been here longer than 25 years before you leave tonight, and just maybe ask them some questions and see if they know anything about these slides that we just talked about. So, and last but not least, I do snowflake photography, and and this is a teaser for maybe next year. I'll talk to Corey about this. But I've been kind of accumulating some really interesting things that I've seen, and I do want to put a talk together. An example is, kind of a normal run-of-the-mill snowflake. That's probably not something you want to hang on your wall. But the inside of this snowflake is unbelievable. And I think it looks like a wishbone. And my girls think it's like a marshmallow man or something. But, totally asymmetrical, has nothing to do with six-sided anything, well, sort of. But there's just some really cool stuff. So I have some other interesting ones that I want to share. And this is recycled powder. It's what we've been skiing lately. And a little bit of faceting on snow that falls. Even this was the same day that snowflake fell, or the next day. And some cool things that you find when you look under with the microscope. So this is all I've got. If you have any questions, want to get in touch with me, see me tonight. This is my Instagram and my website. Just put up there if you want to get in touch with me. That's the easiest way. And that's a snowflake from this season at Powder Mountain. So that's all I got. Go chat with some folks and learn some stories tonight. So.